There's one chemical in almost every product you buy that your body was never designed to process: E471. Mono and diglycerides of fatty acids. You see it on labels constantly. Assume it's been tested and approved as safe, and keep eating it multiple times daily without question. But this chemical is quietly destroying your gut bacteria, triggering chronic inflammation and making processed food impossible to resist, while manufacturers profit from using the cheapest possible ingredients. It wasn't in food 30 years ago. Your parents didn't eat it growing up, but now it's in your bread, yogurt, ice cream, and almost everything else filling your kitchen cupboards. I'm revealing what E471 actually is, why it's suddenly everywhere, what it's doing inside your body, and how to avoid it. Here's what E471 actually is. E471 sounds scientific and harmless. Most people assume numbers on ingredient lists mean the product has been tested, approved, and safe for consumption. This assumption is exactly what manufacturers rely on to hide what's really in your food. E471 is mono and diglycerides of fatty acids. These are emulsifiers, chemicals that bind fat and water together so they don't separate during storage, transportation, or on supermarket shelves. In real food made traditionally, fat and water naturally separate over time. Cream rises to the top of milk. Oil separates from vinegar in salad dressing. Butter is a solid fat that melts when heated. Manufacturers don't want separation because it makes products look unappealing to you when you're shopping in supermarkets. They want products that stay uniform, smooth, and stable for months or even years on shelves without any visible changes. So they add emulsifiers to force fat and water to stay mixed artificially, creating stability that doesn't exist naturally. Mono and diglycerides are made by breaking down fats, usually vegetable oils like palm oil or soybean oil, using chemical processes involving glycerol and various catalysts. The resulting substance acts like soap inside your food, keeping everything blended together in ways that wouldn't occur naturally. This isn't a natural ingredient your body recognizes from evolutionary history. It's an engineered chemical created in factories specifically to solve manufacturing problems related to shelf life and ingredient costs, not to nourish you or provide health benefits. The name is deliberately technical and boring. E471. Mono and diglycerides of fatty acids. These names don't trigger an alarm in your mind when you see them printed on labels. They sound scientific and official rather than concerning or questionable. This naming is intentional marketing psychology. If the ingredient was listed as chemically modified fat soap or industrial emulsifying agent, you'd immediately question why it's necessary in your food. But E471? That sounds like a code that's been carefully approved by government authorities who've tested it thoroughly for safety. The reality is more complicated and concerning. E471 is legal because it's classified as generally recognized as safe, based on older testing conducted decades ago that didn't examine long-term effects on gut bacteria populations or chronic inflammation markers. Recent research is revealing concerns that weren't considered or even understood when this chemical was first approved for use in food. Your great-grandparents never ate this chemical. Your grandparents probably didn't eat it regularly either, but you eat it multiple times daily in products you trust, products you feed your family, products marketed as normal, everyday food that everyone buys. The chemical structure of mono and diglycerides resembles natural fats closely enough that your body initially treats them similarly during digestion. They're absorbed in your digestive system like fats are normally absorbed, but they behave differently once inside you, interacting with gut bacteria and intestinal structures in ways whole natural fats never would. This distinction matters enormously for your long-term health. Natural fats from butter, olive oil, or animal products are recognized by your body because humans have eaten them for thousands of years. Your digestive system knows exactly how to process them efficiently. Chemically modified emulsifiers are novel to human biology. Your body hasn't evolved specific mechanisms to handle them properly because they didn't exist in food until very recently in human history. The approval process for food additives like E471 focuses primarily on acute toxicity testing. Will this chemical poison someone immediately if consumed? If not, it's often approved without extensive long-term studies examining cumulative effects from daily consumption over decades. This regulatory approach misses chronic health impacts that only emerge after years or decades of regular exposure. So why is this chemical in almost everything you buy? E471 appears in an extraordinary range of products you probably buy every single week without thinking twice. Bread, margarine, ice cream, yogurt, cakes, biscuits, chocolate, ready meals, sauces, cream substitutes, coffee creamers, whipped toppings. Protein bars are marketed as healthy, even products with organic or natural labels. Walk down any supermarket aisle and you'll struggle to find products without emulsifiers listed somewhere on the ingredient panel. This isn't because they're necessary for food to exist or be nutritious, it's because they're necessary for cheap industrial food production that maximizes profit margins whilst reducing ingredient quality. Manufacturers use E471 for several specific reasons that benefit their bottom line, not your health or nutrition. First, it allows them to use cheaper ingredients whilst maintaining the texture and mouthfeel you expect from products made with expensive, high-quality fats. Real bread made traditionally uses flour, water, salt, and yeast. The richness and soft texture come from butter or quality oil added separately during mixing. But butter is expensive. High-quality olive oil is expensive. E471 allows manufacturers to use cheaper fats, often low-grade vegetable oils like palm oil or generic vegetable oil, which is usually soybean oil, whilst maintaining the texture you expect from bread made with butter. You're eating inferior ingredients held together with chemicals to mimic the quality you're paying for, but not actually receiving in your food. The cost savings are substantial for manufacturers producing at scale. Butter might cost £3 per kilogram wholesale. Cheap vegetable oil costs 60 pence per kilogram. When you're producing millions of loaves annually, replacing butter with cheap oil plus a small amount of emulsifiers saves enormous amounts of money, whilst you pay the same retail price or even more for products made with inferior ingredients. Second, it extends shelf life dramatically beyond what real food naturally achieves. Real cream or butter-based products spoil within days or at most a week because bacteria can break down natural fats relatively quickly. Products containing E471 last weeks or even months at room temperature because the chemically modified fats are more stable and resistant to bacterial breakdown. This extended shelf life means products can be manufactured in massive batches at centralized factories, stored in warehouses for extended periods, transported long distances across the country or internationally, and sit on supermarket shelves for weeks without spoiling or showing visible signs of age. You're not buying fresh food when you see products with shelf lives measured in weeks or months. You're buying old food preserved with chemicals so manufacturers can produce it cheaply in bulk quantities, store it extensively, and distribute it widely without waste or spoilage, cutting into their profit margins. The fresh bakery section in many supermarkets often isn't fresh at all, despite the marketing and positioning. Many products are baked in-store from frozen dough produced weeks or even months earlier in central factories located far away. Emulsifiers keep that dough stable during freezing, long-term frozen storage, thawing, and final baking, whilst maintaining texture that mimics genuinely fresh bread baked that morning from scratch. Third, it creates an appealing, smooth texture without expensive ingredients or careful traditional processing techniques. Real ice cream made traditionally uses generous amounts of cream, whole milk, egg yolks, and sugar, churned carefully at specific temperatures to incorporate air, creating a smooth texture naturally through proper technique. This requires quality, expensive ingredients, and skilled processing. Cheap ice cream uses much less cream, more water to reduce costs, more air pumped in mechanically to increase volume, and emulsifiers like E471 to create an artificially smooth texture that mimics real ice cream made with expensive dairy. You think you're eating cream-based ice cream rich with dairy fat and nutrients. You're actually eating water, air, and chemicals engineered to feel like cream whilst costing manufacturers far less to produce. The container might say ice cream prominently on the label, but the actual ingredient proportions bear little resemblance to what ice cream was historically or traditionally. Some ice cream products contain so little actual cream and so much air pumped in that they can't legally be called ice cream in certain jurisdictions with stricter labeling standards. They're labeled frozen dessert or frozen dairy dessert instead. But emulsifiers make even these inferior products feel creamy enough that most consumers don't notice they're eating flavoured frozen foam rather than actual ice cream. Fourth, it prevents separation that looks unappealing to consumers who've been conditioned by decades of marketing to expect perfectly uniform products. Real yogurt made traditionally from milk and live bacterial cultures separates naturally as fermentation proceeds. A layer of whey, liquid containing proteins, minerals, and nutrients, forms on top of the thicker yogurt below. This separation is completely normal, harmless, and actually indicates that genuine live fermentation is occurring as it should. The whey contains beneficial nutrients and can simply be stirred back into the yogurt before eating. But consumers who don't understand traditional food see separated yogurt and immediately assume it's spoiled, old, or somehow defective. They buy uniform products that look perfect instead. Manufacturers add E471 to keep yogurt artificially uniform, so you never see natural separation that would occur without emulsifiers. They're solving a cosmetic problem. Your mistaken assumption that separation means spoilage, with chemicals rather than educating you that separation in yogurt is completely normal and actually healthy. The whey that separates naturally contains beneficial nutrients, including proteins and minerals. When manufacturers add emulsifiers to prevent this natural separation, they're hiding natural processes that actually indicate quality and freshness. You're buying products engineered to look artificially uniform, regardless of actual freshness or active fermentation. Fifth, it allows lower quality, cheaper fats to be substituted for traditional expensive fats without detection by taste or texture that would normally reveal the substitution. Real chocolate uses cocoa butter, the natural fat extracted from cocoa beans during chocolate production. Cocoa butter is expensive because cocoa beans themselves are expensive, and the extraction process is labor-intensive. Many chocolate products now use vegetable fats, usually palm oil or other cheap oils, held together with E471 and other emulsifiers to mimic cocoa butter texture and mouthfeel. You think you're eating chocolate made with expensive cocoa butter. You're actually eating cheap vegetable oil flavored with cocoa powder and made to feel like chocolate using chemical texture modification. The taste difference is noticeable if you directly compare real chocolate made with cocoa butter to cheaper products made with vegetable fats. Real chocolate made with cocoa butter melts smoothly at body temperature, creating a distinctive, pleasant mouthfeel. Chocolate made with vegetable fats and emulsifiers melts differently at different temperatures, feels slightly waxy or greasy, and lacks the complexity and smoothness of real chocolate made traditionally. But if you've only ever eaten emulsifier-containing chocolate and never tasted real chocolate made properly with cocoa butter, you don't know what real chocolate should taste like for comparison. You accept the inferior product as normal because you've never experienced better. Sixth, it enables manufacturers to reduce portion sizes of expensive ingredients whilst maintaining the expected volume and appearance that consumers have been trained to expect. Whipped cream traditionally is just cream whipped vigorously to incorporate air, roughly doubling or tripling volume. Real whipped cream is expensive because cream itself is expensive. Whipped toppings sold in plastic tubs or aerosol spray cans contain minimal actual cream despite the name. They're mostly water, cheap vegetable oil, air, and emulsifiers, creating foam that superficially resembles whipped cream whilst costing a fraction to produce. You're paying for air and chemicals pretending to be dairy products. The ubiquity of E471 throughout your food isn't about food quality, nutrition, tradition, or your health and well-being. It's entirely about reducing ingredient costs, extending shelf life to enable centralized mass production, simplifying logistics and distribution, and creating profit margins while you remain unaware that what you're eating bears little resemblance to food as it existed historically or traditionally. Now let's look at what E471 is doing to your body. For decades, E471 was considered safe based on the assumption that emulsifiers pass through your digestive system without being significantly absorbed or causing any harm to your body. Recent research conducted over the past 10 to 15 years is systematically dismantling this comfortable assumption with increasingly concerning findings. Your gut contains trillions of bacteria, collectively called your microbiome, that regulate not just the digestion of food, but also immune function, mood and mental health, hormone production, metabolism, and overall health throughout your entire body. These bacteria exist in a protective mucus layer lining your intestines. This mucus barrier physically separates bacteria from direct contact with intestinal cells, preventing inflammation and maintaining healthy gut function. The mucus layer serves as a critical protective interface between your body and the external environment. Beneficial bacteria live in this mucus, helping to digest food particles and producing vitamins your body needs. But the barrier prevents them from touching intestinal cells directly, which would trigger unnecessary immune responses. This careful separation is essential for maintaining health. Emulsifiers like E471 are designed specifically to break down barriers between fat and water that normally don't mix. They're essentially detergents that dissolve boundaries, keeping incompatible substances separate. This chemical property makes them extremely useful in food manufacturing for creating uniform, stable products. But this same property creates serious problems in your gut environment. When you eat emulsifiers regularly in multiple products daily, they don't just emulsify your food during the digestive process. They begin breaking down the protective mucus barrier lining your intestines. Research from institutions including Georgia State University and many other research centers has demonstrated this clearly, using both animal models and increasingly in human observational studies and controlled trials. The evidence is mounting consistently across multiple independent research groups. Studies show that dietary emulsifiers can thin the mucus layer significantly, allowing bacteria to come into much closer contact with intestinal cells than should normally occur. This proximity triggers inflammatory responses because your immune system recognizes bacteria getting too close as a potential threat requiring immune activation and defense. The inflammation isn't dramatic or immediately noticeable after eating. You don't consume emulsifiers and feel sick immediately or develop obvious symptoms. It's low-grade chronic inflammation that persists quietly as long as you continue eating emulsifiers regularly in multiple products throughout each day. This type of inflammation is insidious, causing cumulative damage over months and years without obvious symptoms until problems become serious enough to produce noticeable health issues. Chronic low-grade inflammation is strongly associated with numerous serious health problems, including inflammatory bowel disease, Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, metabolic syndrome, insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, obesity, cardiovascular disease, and increased intestinal permeability, often called leaky gut syndrome. Leaky gut sounds like alternative medicine pseudoscience, but it is actually well documented in mainstream medical research as increased intestinal permeability. When the gut barrier is compromised by inflammation or other factors, larger molecules that should stay contained in the digestive tract can pass through into the bloodstream, triggering immune responses and systemic inflammation throughout your entire body. beyond just the gut. Your body isn't designed to handle chemicals that actively break down protective barriers. Natural fats in traditional whole foods don't have this detergent effect because they're digested and absorbed normally through well-established metabolic pathways without disrupting gut structure or barrier function. Chemically modified emulsifiers behave fundamentally differently, interfering with normal gut barrier function in ways whole foods never would throughout human evolutionary history. The gut bacteria composition changes caused by emulsifiers are particularly concerning for long-term health outcomes. Multiple independent studies have found that dietary emulsifiers can substantially alter the composition of gut bacteria, reducing populations of beneficial species whilst allowing potentially harmful bacteria to proliferate unchecked. These bacterial composition changes affect far more than just the digestion of food. Your gut bacteria profoundly influence immune system development and function throughout your life. Approximately 70% of your entire immune system resides in or immediately near your gut, constantly responding to signals from gut bacteria populations. When beneficial bacteria decline substantially and harmful bacteria increase, your immune function changes in ways that can increase susceptibility to infections, autoimmune conditions, and various inflammatory diseases. Gut bacteria also directly produce neurotransmitters, including serotonin, dopamine, and GABA, that profoundly affect mood, anxiety levels, and overall mental health. The gut-brain axis, bidirectional communication between gut bacteria populations and brain function, means changes to your microbiome composition from regular emulsifier consumption can directly affect mental health, potentially contributing to anxiety, depression, and cognitive changes over time. Gut bacteria regulates metabolism and body weight through multiple mechanisms. Certain bacterial species are strongly associated with lean body composition and healthy metabolism, while other species are associated with obesity and metabolic dysfunction. Emulsifiers that shift bacterial composition toward obesity-associated species can make weight management substantially more difficult, regardless of calorie intake or exercise levels. You're not just eating emulsifiers in one product occasionally as a rare treat. You're eating them in bread at breakfast, yogurt at lunch, biscuits as afternoon snacks, ready meals at dinner, and ice cream for dessert. The cumulative exposure from multiple products consumed daily means your gut is constantly exposed to chemicals that disrupt its protective barriers and beneficial bacteria populations without any respite or recovery time. Now, I'm about to reveal the common culprits that contain this chemical. E471 is hiding in products you trust implicitly. In products marketed as healthy choices, products you buy confidently for your family, believing you're making good decisions. Bread represents one of the most egregious offenders in your regular weekly shopping. Traditional bread requires exactly 4 ingredients to produce excellent results: flour, water, salt, and yeast. Nothing else is necessary or has ever been necessary. Sourdough uses only 3: flour, water, and salt. Real bread existed for thousands of years across every culture, with these simple ingredients producing loaves that nourished entire civilizations. But walk down any supermarket bread aisle and check ingredient lists carefully on standard loaves. Most contain E471 or other emulsifiers plus 10 to 15 additional ingredients you don't recognize and can't pronounce. Manufacturers use emulsifiers deliberately to create a softer texture that stays artificially soft for much longer than natural bread, extend shelf life beyond what real bread naturally achieves through traditional baking, and allow the use of cheaper, inferior fats instead of butter or quality oils, while maintaining the expected texture you've been conditioned to associate with good bread. Even bread marketed explicitly as premium, artisan, or craft often contains emulsifiers hidden strategically among lengthy ingredient lists, designed to look wholesome and traditional, sold with reassuring terms like wheat flour and yeast extract obscuring the chemicals listed immediately afterward. You're paying premium prices that suggest quality for chemical-enhanced bread that's pretending to be traditionally made, whilst being fundamentally different from real bread. The unnatural softness of modern supermarket bread that stays perfectly soft for an entire week or longer isn't natural at all, despite seeming convenient. Real bread goes noticeably stale within 2 days maximum because starch molecules naturally recrystallize as moisture redistributes through the loaf. This staling process is completely normal and has occurred in bread for thousands of years. Bread that stays soft for a week or more contains chemicals specifically designed to prevent these normal natural staling processes from occurring as they should. Yogurt is another shocking hiding place that surprises most people when they learn the truth. Real yogurt requires exactly 2 ingredients to produce the fermented product humans have eaten for millennia: milk and live bacterial cultures. That's it. Fermentation of milk by beneficial bacteria creates yogurt through a simple, natural process that has existed for thousands of years without any additives. But check most supermarket yogurts carefully, and you'll find lengthy ingredient lists. They contain E471, modified starch, thickeners, stabilizers, and numerous other additives you wouldn't expect in fermented milk. Manufacturers add these chemicals deliberately to prevent natural separation that occurs in real yogurt, create an artificially smoother texture that doesn't exist naturally, and allow the use of less actual dairy while maintaining the creamy mouthfeel you expect from real yogurt made properly. You think you're eating simple fermented milk with beneficial live bacteria supporting your gut health. You're actually eating a modified milk product held together with industrial chemicals pretending to be yogurt. Ice cream has become almost impossible to buy without emulsifiers, unless you shop at premium specialty stores. Real ice cream made traditionally uses cream, whole milk, sugar, and egg yolks churned carefully to incorporate air naturally through proper technique. Most supermarket ice cream uses E471 extensively to reduce expensive cream content dramatically, increase air content artificially to boost volume, and create a smooth texture chemically rather than through quality ingredients and proper churning. You're paying for frozen air and chemicals rather than the actual dairy, products you believe you're purchasing. The big question is, how can you avoid this chemical? Avoiding E471 doesn't require shopping at expensive organic stores or making everything from scratch. It requires knowing what to look for and making strategic swaps. Check the 5 products you eat most frequently. For most people, this is bread, yogurt, spreads, breakfast items, and snacks. Check ingredient lists specifically for E471, mono and diglycerides, or emulsifiers. If they contain emulsifiers, find alternatives without them. This doesn't always mean more expensive options. For bread, look for real sourdough or bakery bread listing only flour, water, salt, and yeast or sourdough culture. Avoid anything listing emulsifiers or more than 6 ingredients. Real bread goes stale within 2 or 3 days. If bread stays soft for a week, it contains chemicals you don't want. For yogurt, buy natural yogurt with 2 ingredients, milk and live cultures. Nothing else is needed. Plain natural yogurt without emulsifiers costs the same or less than processed varieties, whilst being infinitely healthier for your gut. For spreads, use real butter. Butter is cream churned until the fat separates. 1 ingredient: no emulsifiers. Margarine and spreads are emulsifier-based products by definition. Switching to butter eliminates emulsifiers entirely. For ice cream, look for premium brands listing cream, milk, sugar, and eggs only. These cost more but contain no E471. Alternatively, reduce ice cream consumption rather than eating emulsifier-laden versions regularly. When shopping, use this simple rule. If the ingredient list exceeds 7 items for simple products, put it back. Real food doesn't need 10 or 15 ingredients. Read labels carefully for 2 weeks. After that, you'll know which brands to buy without checking every time. Don't try to eliminate emulsifiers completely overnight. Focus on products you eat most frequently. If you eat bread, daily prioritize finding bread without E471 first. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is to reduce cumulative daily exposure to occasional exposure from foods you eat rarely. Your gut bacteria need time to recover. When you reduce emulsifier consumption, the mucus layer can regenerate, beneficial bacteria can repopulate, and inflammation can decrease. Improvements begin within weeks. E471 is in almost everything you eat, disrupting your gut bacteria and increasing inflammation, whilst manufacturers profit from cheaper ingredients. This chemical wasn't in the food your grandparents ate. It's not necessary for nutrition, it's necessary for profit margins. Stop buying products with ingredient lists exceeding 7 items. Stop trusting marketing and start reading actual ingredients. Start checking for E471 in products you eat most frequently. Your gut will recover when you reduce exposure. So tell me, which products are you checking first? Share this with anyone eating processed food daily without realizing what's disrupting their health. Subscribe for more breakdowns like this, and see you in the next one.